a result, millions have died because of this centuries-long dispute. Al Jazeera journalist, Israel-Palestine conflict, November 30th, 2023. Yet again, we see the two choices: brotherhood or death. But unfortunately, these countries have chosen the deaths of millions, all because of their opinions. When will we take heed? Sadly, time does not permit me to discuss many other cases, like Congo's gender war or Russia and Ukraine's land war. So let's discuss our beloved Bahamas. We may not be facing a war like other countries, or in the middle of an Essequibo fight like Guyana and Venezuela, but xenophobia, homophobia, and misogyny, coupled with violence, have dogged our society for some time and all threaten the Bahamas if we don't heed Dr. King's principle. In response to the 2017 drowning of 17 Haitians, we have heard the famous "Drown Them and Kill Them" video played on social media. Just recently, on December 2nd, 2023, an American transgender woman was beaten in a nightclub, and it was internationally labeled as a hate crime. And yes, we cannot ignore the plight of our women, who still today do not have equal access to pass on citizenship, and the measures to protect them against various sexual threats. As our pledge states, we are meant to be one people, united in love and service. When we stain our image as a nation because we fail to be our brother's keeper, the economic repercussions will be dire for our tourist-driven economy. Do we really want to be blacklisted again? When we continue to murder one another with increasing rates, our social state will continue to deteriorate. Would it truly be better in the Bahamas then? As I conclude, the words of Thomas Hobbes, English philosopher, resonate with me. In his book, The Leviathan Principle, he said, "Defect in understanding is ignorance. In reasoning, erroneous opinion. When these become evident, the life of men is nasty, brutish, and short." When will we as humans learn to live together? When will we see past differences that don't make us any less human? The answer to these questions, I don't know. But what I do know is that the two scenarios, brotherhood or death, are being played out in societies today. I hope the words of Dr. King become a true benchmark of society. We must learn to live together as brothers, or perish together as fools. As young men and women, our future is depending on it. What will you choose? Brotherhood or death? I say, let us unite as true brothers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dante. The Brothers of Alpha wish you all the best in your secondary education. On March 29th, 1968, Dr. King went to Memphis, Tennessee in support of the Black sanitary public workers. The workers had been on strike since March 12 for higher wages and better treatment. In one incident, a black street repairman received pay for 2 hours when they were sent home because of bad weather, but their white counterparts were paid for the full day. Did you know that while visiting Bimini in 1968, Dr. King wrote his sanitation worker speech? In traveling back to Memphis, there was a delay due to a bomb threat on his plane. To make the presentation to the 2024 MLK Junior High School oratorical winner, our brother Ashley Knowles, Algernon N. Cargill, Oscar L. Dossett, Miss Marcy Thompson, principal of St. Augustine's College. Thank you, Dante and Ms. Thompson. This is the second year that the St. Augustine's College has captured the first place in the oratorical competition. Thank you, Dante and Mrs. Thompson. Dr. King was not only a gifted orator, but a gifted writer. Did you know that Dr. King wrote his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech delivered in Oslo, Norway in 1964 while visiting Bimini? To announce the second annual MLK Junior Collegiate Essay winner is Brother Rashawn Kerr, the secretary of the Phi Mu chapter and a senior majoring in electrical engineering technology.
Good evening. The winner of the second annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Collegiate Essay Competition is Malika Kerr. Congratulations.
Congratulations to Michaela Kerr, the 2024 winner of the MLK Junior Collegiate Essay Competition. Once again, congratulations, Dante and Michaela. Coming to introduce our guest speaker is Brother Lyndon D. Maycock, Director of Finance and the Education Committee of the Iota Epsilon Lambda Chapter.
Good evening. Reverend Dr. Herman Skip Mason, Jr. is the senior pastor of historic West Mitchell Christian Methodist Episcopal Church in Atlanta, Georgia. A proud native of Atlanta and an honors graduate of the Atlanta Public Schools. Dr. Mason matriculated and graduated from Morris Brown College in 1984. He continued his education at Atlanta University, now Clark Atlanta University, and earned a master's degree in library and information science with a concentration in African American studies and archives, museum management. He's also a graduate of the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, where he obtained the Master of Divinity and the Doctor of Ministry degrees, respectively. Dr. Mason, a seasoned educator for over 35 years, has served as professor of history, college archivist, director and dean of students, and vice president of student services at both Morris Brown College and Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. Currently, he serves as the dean of library and museum services and assistant professor of African American history and religion at Voorhees College in Denmark, South Carolina. In September 2023, Dr. Mason was inducted in the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame Foundation. Dr. Mason is the father of two wonderful young adults, Jewel and Jodari. Brother Dr. Mason is the 33rd General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Incorporated. During his tenure, he chartered the Sigma Beta Lambda chapter located in Freeport, Grand Bahama. He is a friend of the Bahamas, and we welcome him to our Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Reverend Dr. Herman Skip Mason, Jr.
Thank you so much, my dear brother Maycock. I had lunch with Brother Maycock today, and we had a wonderful meal of red snapper and salad. I'm a Southern boy. I'm from Atlanta. So anytime we eat fish, we always have a bottle of hot sauce handy. And I requested hot sauce, the kind that I'm accustomed to. But Brother Maycock, whom I thought was a very dear friend and brother, had the way to bring me some Bahamian hot sauce. It was a little orangish, reddish, and I took a knife and began to lather my fish. That was not a good experience. I thought he was my friend. I greet you in the wonderful name of our Lord and Savior. I count it a joy and a blessing to be here today. I am so grateful for the opportunity to share with you in this historic lecture on this great campus. Earlier today, I had the opportunity to share with university administrators, the president, vice president, and other wonderful administrators here on this campus. And I was just overwhelmed by the beauty of the library, the vision, and the engagement of the students here. Protocol already having been established, I greet the university administrators present. I greet the guests who are here. I especially greet my wonderful brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I am especially grateful for the invitation which came from the chapter, from Brother Cargill. Let me acknowledge the chapter president, Brother Dorsett, all of the other chapter presidents that are here. Let me acknowledge Mr. Hunt, Diplomat Hunt. Thank you so much. Much of what you shared in your presentation, you stole from my lecture today. And let me acknowledge Mr. Dante Butler. My goodness, what a remarkable young man with a bright future. And I was so glad to be able to hear your oration, because I was reminded that when Dr. King was 14 years old, his parents sent him on a Greyhound bus to Albany, Georgia, to participate in an oratorical contest. It is amazing that while Dr. King was a student at Morehouse College, where I worked for 17 years, that he received the grade of C+ in his speech class. He would go on to be, as you all know, one of the great orators. And I find that very ironic. And to the young lady who received the award for the essay, congratulations to you. And we are just grateful for the great talent that emanates from this beautiful island. Let me also acknowledge any of the members of the Divine Nine. If you have been around over the last 3 days, you have been bombarded and flooded with Founders Day greetings from the members of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Today, members of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. And then I think tomorrow, the members of Zeta Phi Beta sorority will flood you with their Founders Day greetings. And then on the next day, we can all take a rest for a while. When I received the invitation to come, I reached out to several who had attended and presented to you. And they shared with me that this was indeed a wonderful opportunity. The brothers of the Bahamas are very dear and very special to me. Very supportive during my administration and tenure as general president. and I truly count you as some of my closest friends and brothers. Many of you recall in August of 2011, we gathered in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., to celebrate and to culminate an almost 30-year venture and mission with this fraternity. And as we gathered around this magnificent statue, the only statue of an African American and a man on the Mall of Washington, D.C., we stood with great pride and joy that not only did we dedicate the statue of this leader, this civil rights activist, but he was also a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha. I'm reminded of the lines of a poem that is very dear to me. There is nothing in this whole wide world that we wouldn't do for one another. I'm sure we would risk our lives to save that of another. And when they ask you, why did you weigh yourself down with the load of another, you simply smile at them and say, he ain't heavy, he's my brother. And so I gather here today with this incredible and very challenging theme that you have presented today to talk about our brother and to remind you and to remind this entire community that the work that we do is not heavy when we're doing it for our brothers, and let me say also for our sisters. I stand on great shoulders today, understanding the assignment, but more importantly, that you, my brothers of Alpha in the Bahamas, would create such a magnificent opportunity for this community to invite and present lecturers, but more importantly, to recognize the gifts and talents of young students, but to espouse and to lift up the ideas and the aims of our beloved brother Martin Luther King Jr. And I am honored that I am in good company with some of your previous speakers that you have invited, including two past general presidents, Harry Johnson and Milton Carver Davis. I had the very rare opportunity when I was general president of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity to monitor very closely the final production of the statue, which we presented to the nation and to the world. I traveled to China to view the model, and then when it arrived here, and just before they took the scaffold down, I was invited to have a few quiet moments with Dr. King face to face, and there are only just a handful of those who can say that they were face to face with this majestic and magnificent statue. And in those moments, I just began to ponder, what was it like for a man who was only 39 years old when his life was taken away, to have the weight of the world on him? What were some of you doing when you were 39 years old? Certainly doing good work, but not leading a movement, not having your life threatened daily. And so in this special moment, on a very cold day in Washington, D.C., I counted it joy and an honor that this monument would stand as a testament to the work that was done and to the work that is left to be done. And I believe that it was no coincidence that when Dr. King was a student at Boston University, as it has already been shared, that he chose Alpha Phi Alpha as the organization that he would become a part of. When we gathered in August of 2011, it was a magnificent day. And a few months later, we returned back so that we could officially dedicate it with the President of the United States, Barack Obama, and Mrs. Obama, then Vice President Joe Biden, and Dr. Jill Biden, the Secretary of the Interior, Secretary Salazar, and of course, Harry Johnson flanked on one end, and I was flanked on the other. And we all knew that this statue would inspire those who would come to the mall to read the words of Dr. King and to further research and to try to live out the values and principles that he espoused. You've chosen today a theme that has been echoed throughout this wonderful event. We must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. I want to stop for just a moment because I want to spend the next few moments in my lecture trying to present to you some of Dr. King's influences and the background which propelled him to do the great work. He did not grow up to be the Dr. King that we have come to know. It was my fortunate pleasure when I was in graduate school in Atlanta to work for the National Park Service. And I worked at the Martin Luther King Jr. birth home. And so I had an opportunity to learn very much about his life intimately, but it went even further back because his daughter Bernice and I were childhood friends. And we grew up together, attended summer camp together. I even kissed her at summer camp and got in trouble. That's another story. That's not a part of this lecture. But we had a wonderful and still have a wonderful relationship. We must learn to live together as brothers and sisters. I think when we were searching for the light, as all alpha men must do, they stood aside and they laughed out aloud and they said, I wouldn't do that with you. And yet, when we had crossed the sands and the light we could finally see, they stood aside and whispered, oh, how I wish it were me. I know the decision I made was wise. Of this I'm sure and have no doubt each day in my life will have blue skies, for we're alphas from here on out, and never again will we be lonely. For we have brothers everywhere. Even when I come to Nassau, Bahamas, I have a whole lot of good brothers there. There is something that resonates with all of us who are a part of one of the Divine Nine organizations. If you are a member of the Divine Nine, one of the sororities or fraternities, would you please raise your hand so that I might see? And the light is in my face, so there's somewhat of a glare. So you understand and remember that part of the process, this organizational, societal process called membership intake or pledging, depending on what year, what decade, part of it was to help you to understand how to work together as brothers and sisters. So the selfish and the meanness was extracted from the process. When I was sort of seeking and wanting to join the fraternity, I picked up a book, and there in that book, Andre, I saw a picture of Dr. King, and it said he was an alpha. That was it for me. I didn't care what Kappa Alpha Psi brothers did. I didn't care what Omega Psi Phi Beta Sigma, no disrespect. I love them all. But when I saw that Martin Luther King Jr., the greatest nonviolent civil rights hero of our time, was a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, I wanted to learn more and explore more about this fraternity and about this organization. And so we look at the life and influences of ML, as he is affectionately known, in Atlanta, born in a beautiful two-story Victorian house on Auburn Avenue, to a father who was a preacher and pastor, a father who grew up illiterate until he had an opportunity to go to a preparatory academy and to learn how to read and write when he was in his 20s, a mother who had attended Hampton and eventually Spelman and would later graduate from Morris Brown, a grandfather who was a pillar of the community, one of the founders of the Atlanta branch of the NAACP, a grandmother who was the church organist. And so he grew up in a very wonderful family structure and household, but was a very mischievous young man living in Atlanta in the Jim Crow South. And he had a number of run-ins with racism in some of the segregated stores that began to change his philosophy and his view and would ultimately direct his life's journey. Martin Luther King Jr. entered Morehouse College at the age of 14. The president of Morehouse College, Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, became president in 1941 and realized that there was a deficit of young men. Morehouse is an all-male school in Atlanta, Georgia. And so he created the opportunity for early admission. And so ML was 14. Can you imagine going to college at the age of 14? He went and immersed himself. He was a city student and immersed himself in the culture and in pursuit of education. His transcript will tell you that he was not the smartest student in the class. His emphasis was on dressing. He was a sharp dresser. And he wore these tweed suits, so he developed a nickname called Tweed. That was his Morehouse nickname. He was a ladies' man. Imagine 14-year-old young man trying to chase those beautiful women over at Spelman College. Some might say he was delusional at 14. But it was there at Morehouse where he began to read some of the great classics. He was taught by many of the great professors, and so he was being shaped to become what he thought he would be, and that was a preacher and a teacher, to follow his father's footstep in the pulpit. Obviously, God had other plans for him. In 1948, he graduated from Morehouse College at the age of 18. He traveled to Boston University and entered into seminary where he could pursue his divinity degree. And it was there where there was a cataclysmic shift in his thinking. He became really more pointed and more intentional in reading and learning about the Bible and understanding how it relates to the development of the human race. More importantly, Dr. King was very concerned about the treatment or mistreatment of people of color. And so he began to explore those and those ideas and those thoughts while he was in seminary. As it has already been stated, while he was at the Crozier Theological Seminary, he became a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. And these are his line brothers. And it's interesting that as you look at them decked in their tails and tusk, look at that smile on Brother King's face. Now, we're talking about 1952, so we know that the pledging was just a little different. And I'll leave it at that, because I think this is going to be televised, so I'm sure it was a most enjoyable process, enough so that it prompted these smiles on the day that they were initiated into Alpha Phi Alpha. Our family trees are not the same. We all have different mothers, but yet I stand and tell the world that these men are my Alpha brothers. It's like we live our lives together as we meet for the very first time, as this powerful sense of being an alpha man makes everything seem fine. We must learn how to live together as brothers and sisters. I hope my brothers here will reflect somewhat on your process and on your journey into becoming a member of the fraternity, and our sisters who are members of sororities, because at the very end of the day, we celebrate brotherhood and sisterhood. We may not all get along, we may not all be in agreement. I'm very certain that the brothers of our chapters here, Iota Epsilon Lambda chapter, I know you all have probably some of the most peaceful meetings. There's never any arguments, never any disagreements. Am I telling a little lie here or there? We learn how to live together as brothers and as sisters. And so I don't discount Dr. King's process. This is the point that I'm trying to make to you, that it was a part of this process to see the light, to learn the history, to learn the principles of the fraternity, to understand Manly D's scholarship and love for all mankind, that these helped to shape his outlook and his view as he would later be thrusted in just 3 years from the date of this picture into the first of several movements. And so historically, throughout Dr. King's life, he has always been engaged and involved in the fraternity. Let me say that again. He has always been engaged and involved in the fraternity, and the fraternity has been engaged and involved with him. This is his shingle. It was at a program at Talladega University in Talladega, Alabama, where the Brothers of Alpha were sponsoring a lecture similar to what we have here tonight. And the president of the chapter invited Dr. King, who was then pastoring the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. And he also invited another young Alpha brother who was pastoring a church in Thomasville, Georgia, by the name of Andrew Young. And it was at this program in 1957 that Andrew Young and Martin Luther King Jr. met for the very first time. And this meeting would result in a friendship, a partnership, and an opportunity to work for the movement that would last until Dr. King was assassinated on April 4, 1968. And Andrew Young was standing in the courtyard at the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, when this occurred. We must learn to live together as brothers. Brotherhood is powerful. Sisterhood is powerful. There's nothing that brings me joy than when I hear the AKAs across the country. We have any AKAs in here tonight? when I hear them just go into a conniption when Vice President Kamala Harris's name is mentioned. Yeah, it's okay, go ahead and clap, my sister. That's what they do. Sisterhood. I had the opportunity to meet Vice President Kamala Harris last year for the very first time. And when you go to meet the vice president and take a picture, they give you instructions, you know, don't hold long conversations. In fact, they don't want you to say anything. Just go and stand and take a picture. But you know, my name is Skip Mason. You know, I'm gonna say something. So I went to the vice president and she said, hello, how are you doing? She saw my Alpha jacket and so forth. So I said, I'm doing fine, Vice President Harris, and my mama's a 50-year member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. She said, tell my golden sarai hello. Now, I'm supposed to be moving on so others can come and take the picture. But what she said to me at the end, and she said, and please give the brothers my love. The brothers. She understood the bond, sisterhood bond, brotherhood. I'm trying to drive a point. Brotherhood is not something that's out in the street. It's something that we do, we work on, we feel. And it is something that we espouse to others so that they can understand that there is indeed something we call a true brotherhood. Dr. King traveled across the globe. You talked about his times in the Bimini and the rest and peace. He came this way for peace. That is something that all Bahamians should be proud of. He left the States for peace, solitude, to meet God here, to enjoy the peace, the beauty of the trees, the good food. The conch salad and ginger ale was his favorite meal. The conch salad and ginger ale was his favorite meal. And as it has been spoken, he did write some of the greatest words to some of the most majestic and historic speeches while he was on one of the islands. This is Dr. King and Mrs. Coretta Scott King in Ghana at the celebration of their independence. This is Dr. King with the brothers. With the brothers. Hanging out with the brothers of the Alpha Upsilon chapter in Montgomery. And in the middle is one of the greatest orators in the world and of our fraternity, Belford V. Lawson. And Brother Dr. King hanging out with his brothers. Brotherhood and sisterhood must be fostered. That's why we must take care of each other. Now, I don't know how things are here, but I come from a country that is so divided. We're so divided, and much of the division has to do with things that are going on externally, obviously, but sometimes we can't even come together and sit at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood that Dr. King spoke about in his I Have a Dream speech. In his marches and demonstrations, there were always alpha men around. Now, his best friend, Ralph Abernathy, was a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, but he also understood the tenets of brotherhood. This is Dr. King and Mrs. Coretta Scott King at one of the last events before he died in Atlanta with his chapter, Ada Lambda chapter, of which I am a member. He was the keynote speaker at that time. I'm simply trying to make a point tonight that he was a brother's brother. See, we talk about Dr. King and we lift him and raise him in such great stature as we should. But he was also one who understood the value of this fraternity. And he understood the value of brotherhood and sisterhood, and how when we come together and how when we work together and when we dream together and when we stick together, great things can happen. Another picture of Dr. King in the fraternal setting, Belfort V. Lawson whispering in his ear. Here we have the 22nd General President, Lionel Newsom. I don't know whether any of you remember him or have heard of him. And then, of course, my beloved, the 14th General President, Charles Harris Wesley, the author of our history book. Dr. King and Dr. Wesley, he was a keynote speaker at the commencement for Central State University. And one of the saddest days in the history of the world was, of course, the day Dr. King was assassinated. Many of you recall, if you've read the history, that on April the 3rd, 1968, Dr. King was scheduled to speak at the Mason Temple Church of God in Christ. But he was not feeling well. That day he had been uneasy, and he told his folks that he was skipping the event, and he stayed at the Lorraine Hotel. Well, Andy Young, his brother, called and said, "Doc, you gotta get here. The place is packed. The people want to hear from you. They want to hear from you." See, America has always depended upon strong voices of leadership. I had the extraordinary honor and pleasure today, while I was on this campus, to go to the Pendleton Museum and learn about this great leader whom you all dubbed the father of this country. I didn't know very much about him at all. And when I left the museum, I was so inspired. I was so moved by his story, by the photos, by the artifacts, and listening to some of the brothers share about the work that he did for this great country. And so I was inspired by his life story. Dr. King, when this photo was taken, April 9th, 1968, I was 6 years old in Atlanta. My mother, my father, my uncle are all out here at the cemetery. They were in the march. I knew that something very drastic had happened. I could tell there was a pall in the air. Something in my 6-year-old spirit was not right, and I would later come to understand and know of his death and of his passing. And his Alpha brothers were very much a part of his service, very much a part of the march. And if you look on his tombstone right here, I can point to it, you will see a beautiful wreath of A-Phi A. You can only see just a little portion of it. So even to Omega chapter, as we call it, he was very much a part of our fraternity and our brotherhood. And this is the Sphinx magazine following his death. That if you have it, it is a collector's item. And subsequent conventions, they would honor the memory of Brother Dr. King. Our Alpha brother, the one that calls us here tonight, the one whose birthday is being celebrated all across the country. Breakfasts, scholarships, dinners and luncheons. And every Alpha chapter is doing something to celebrate the life and the legacy. And lo and behold, on January 15, 2024, I am here at the University of the Bahamas to celebrate the life of my Alpha brothers, because my brothers called on me and invited me to come and to say a few words about this great man and to help us to kind of understand that he's speaking of universal brotherhood, but he's also speaking of the brotherhood of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. We must learn to live together as brothers. And the second part of this, or we will perish together as fools. And so I went to his words to see if I could respond to what he saw as some of the solutions that we should be following in order to make sure that we do not perish together as fools, or as Brother Dante said, that perish means we die. The community dies if we are not collected as brothers and as sisters. So one of the first thoughts that I present to you, Dr. King said that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Light and love. Now, if I was going to stop and be an arrogant alpha man, I would say that, oh, the light, he's talking about Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. No. But he's not just talking about Alpha Phi Alpha. He's talking about any situation where we can go into to help to lighten and to bring light into very dark and dreary situations. That's why the work that we do in community, the work that we do at our church, the work that we do in our social organizations is important. The work that we do to uplift our young boys and our young girls. The sacrifice that you make to make sure what chapter gives out over $4 million in scholarships. That is to be commended, because these scholarships will help these young men, these brilliant, bright, talented young men that this lady, I don't know her name, you're the principal of St. Augustine's, students who have a desire to go but don't have the means to go. And so the work that you do is necessary. When we feed the hungry, as we try to do at our church. Atlanta has a sizable homeless and transitional population. As I remind my members over and over again that the best work that we do is not on Sunday morning, it's what we do outside of Sunday morning. To serving our brothers and sisters in our community, to bring in some light, some hope. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. It is amazing if you're keeping up with the politics in the United States, that we are on the verge of having a man who has some 41 convictions to be perhaps the unanimous choice for the Republican Party for the President of the United States of America. Something ain't right with that. Something ain't right with that. And so we as alpha men, we as a Divine Nine community, we must do what we can to make sure that we have good leaders, trusted leaders, respected leaders in these positions to help us to advance our cause. Life's most persistent and urgent question: what are you doing for others? What are you doing? Where's your time spent? Your resources, your money? What are you doing for others? What is Alpha Phi Alpha doing for others? What is Alpha Kappa Alpha doing for others? Delta Sigma Theta, Kappa Alpha Psi, Zeta Phi Beta, Sigma Gamma Rho, Omega Psi Phi, Phi Beta Sigma. What are we doing to make a difference in our communities, in these schools. Alpha men know and remember that our work must be done so that the youth can continue to march onward and upwards towards the light. That's the work that we have been called to do. This is an urgent question that must and begs to be answered. The last point that I think I'll make with this is that Dr. King said that everybody can be great because everybody can do what? They can serve. See, I tell my kids, and I've tried to demonstrate to my 23-year-old and 21-year-old that you have to have a heart of service and compassion. And so I try to emulate that. It's not the big service projects that we're going to take pictures and do photo ops and plaster on Facebook. These are the quiet moments. These are the personal moments where you find yourself one-on-one with someone needing some help or assistance. These are the things that you don't blast and you don't announce. You're not looking for anything in return, but you know out of the depth of your heart that this is something that you must do. Simple things. There are people who go to bed hungry at night. I pastor a church in Atlanta, and on any given evening, we have 3 entrances to the church. On any given evening, there is someone sleeping under covers at the entrance. How do we eradicate this homelessness and some of the other ills that plague us? Well, we continue to work to try to serve our brothers and sisters as best as we can. When we come together, we will not perish. When we put aside our differences, when we put aside our Greek letters and our colors, when we come together, we will not perish. Dr. King said that it really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one destiny affects us all indirectly. And so, my beloved brothers, you are doing it. I thought that I would end on this photo that I snatched off of somebody's Facebook page today. What I see here is the very thing that our 7 founders embodied when they created this organization. And as you are pouring into these young men, the ones who received the trophies and the ones in the back who were participants, you are saying to them that we must come together, we must live together, we must work together as brothers. Because I'm pretty sure that all of the ones who didn't get trophies did a great job as well. They have to be encouraged and supported. And so in the words of the spiritual, it says, walk together, children. Don't you get weary. Pray together, children. Don't you get weary. Sing together, children. Don't you get weary. Talk together, children. Don't you get weary. Vote together, children. Don't you get weary. Well, we're not waiting for that great camp meeting in the promised land. We need it right now. We need brothers and sisters to come together right now in Nassau, Grand Bahamas, in Freeport, in Atlanta, Georgia, in Washington, D.C., in Iowa, and wherever else they're doing these elections. We need to come together. This is my last statement. This is going to be a litmus test for us in America, this upcoming election. And so we, as people of color, we as those who believe in democracy must do as Dr. King said. We must learn how to come together and live together as brothers and sisters, or come November the 5th, 2024, we will perish as fools, and we will have no one else to blame for but ourselves. I am grateful for the opportunity that you have afforded me to come and to share on this, the 95th birthday of our beloved brother, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to ask the brothers of Alpha to please stand with me in this moment. Brothers of Alpha, would you please stand? And if you would join me, as we do when we close out the singing of our hymn, our fraternity prayer, because we pray what we believe. Join me. May the true spirit of the fraternity rule our hearts, guide our thoughts, and control our lives, so that we may become, through the servants of all. Amen. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you, Brother 33rd General President Mason, for your thought-provoking lecture on the theme, we must live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. It is through your message that we are certain that Brother King did try in his life, fighting for justice for all people, not only in the United States, but the world, where oppression and marginalization still exists. It is a testament that he was a drum major for peace, justice, and righteousness, and his living was not in vain. Coming to present the vote of thanks is Brother Devontae Roll. Brother Roll is the program director for the Phi Mu chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated and the recording secretary of the University of the Bahamas National Pan-Hellenic Council. His major is hospitality and tourism management, with a concentration in event management.
Father Andrew Toppin, Ashley Knowles, Oscar L. Dossett, Algernon M. Cargill, Lyndon D. Maycock, and Dante Butler. Thank you. A special thanks to the keynote speaker, Brother Herman Skip Mason, the 33rd General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Brother Mason, it was a great presentation. We want you to know that we appreciate the sacrifice that you made with us on this occasion. You are welcome back to this chapter at any time. Rest assured that we, the Alphas in the Bahamas, will continue to celebrate the life and legacy of our brother, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and help others as we develop leaders, promote brotherhood and academic excellence while providing service and advocacy for our communities. To you, the public, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to live up to the high ideals of Brother Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who would have been 96 today, and who achieved so much in his short lifetime. In closing, we give thanks to Almighty God. A blessed MLK Day to all.
Thank you, Brother Roll. We live in a time where Dr. King's voice reverberates the encouragement of people to work together to solve problems. We live in a time where voices are needed to speak of treating others with dignity and respect, regardless of the difference of opinion that may exist. We must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. It's a clarion call to young people for our nation tonight to learn that many of our inner conflicts are rooted in hate. This is why psychiatrists say, love or perish. Hate is too great a burden to bear. It's our hope that our team resonates with both our audience present and viewing on the social media platforms. As we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we, the members of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, look forward to seeing you January 20th, 2025. Until then, keep safe and good night.
You're watching the ZNS Network, the People's Station.
Coming up in the Bahamas tonight, the Northern Edition. The government's bid to acquire the Grand Bahama Port Authority takes an unexpected turn as the offer is now withdrawn. We have the full details. Also, chairman of the Progressive Liberal Party firing back at the opposition leader's concerns over lack of communication between industrial companies and government. And it's a popular trend, but now doctors are warning against the health risks associated with vaping. The Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition starts now.
This is the Bahamas Tonight, Northern Edition.
Good evening and welcome to the Bahamas Tonight, the Northern Edition. I'm Ramiko Knowles. Thank you so much for tuning in. Topping news tonight, new developments coming to light surrounding the government's pursuit to acquire the Grand Bahama Port Authority. Last year, the Prime Minister affirmed his administration's eagerness to procure the Port Authority and its assets if a suitable buyer is not found. But in a surprising turn of events, the chairman of the Progressive Liberal Party is revealing tonight that the Prime Minister has withdrawn the offer. The full details are in tonight's top story.
You know that various promises were made by the Prime Minister to advance his position that the shareholders need to divest themselves. I'm advised that that offer has now been withdrawn by the government.
In a recent and unexpected twist, the Grand Bahama Port Authority acquisition saga has taken a new direction, with Prime Minister Davis withdrawing the offer to purchase the Port Authority and its assets. The development comes after Prime Minister Davis confirmed the government's willingness to pursue the acquisition